Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sports Lock Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Mostaller, and we have made it to week 14 of the NFL, which in fantasy is the last week before the fantasy football playoffs. So it is a huge week. I'm sure you're sitting there looking at your team and wondering if you're going to make the playoffs or not. It might come down to this week. I know I am in a league where I'm pretty much clinched first. I'm in a league, two leagues where I need to win in order to make the playoffs. So I'm all over the board there. But this is the last week to try to get to the playoffs and hopefully not be punished for getting last place. So we're going to go over our NFL predictions, bets, daily fantasy, and most importantly, this week, start sits. Of course, on Wednesdays at 9:30, 10 o'clock Eastern time, I go live on TikTok, where I answer your live fantasy football questions. So most importantly, this week we'll be taking a look at start sit, especially since there could be some big questions here for this week. You could, either win your league, lose your league based off of the decisions. So come check me out. The account is the Beast Benny Cakes. It's not my Sports Lock podcast account, although I have an account for the podcast, Sports Lock Podcast, but I go live on my personal account, the Beast Benny Cakes. The reason is because I have enough followers to go live on my personal account, but not on the sports podcasts yet. So go follow them both and check me out live Wednesdays, 9:30, 10 o'clock Eastern time over on TikTok. And we should have a good live tomorrow night. So let's take a look at the week 13 results. And our predictions were pretty spot on. They were the best we've done all year. We go 12, 2, and 1. I am very happy about that. The spread, we were 8 and 7, over under 7 and 8, so not the best there. And our locks were 2 and 2. So we have some improvement on our predictions. But our week 13 daily fantasy results, the lineup was pretty good, I should say. I thought Trevor Lawrence would go off a little bit more. We got him for a good price. He did 16.4 fantasy points, only 179 yards, and a touchdown. Again, facing that poor Detroit defense, I was expecting more out of him. Our running backs finished right next to each other. Austin Eckler, 13.2, Brian Robinson, 13.1, but where we got our biggest production came from the wide receiver spot. And that started with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has been a beast all year. He is a guy, if you follow my TikTok account or if you followed the podcast that I was high on, that said, you must draft him. Well, he got you 11 receptions, 114 yards, and two touchdowns. I believe he's in the top five in receptions, and he missed some games due to injury. So that is key there. We also selected Christian Watson. He was a flex play there, but what a pickup. He's went on a fantastic streak. He finished wide receiver 8 with 3 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. But really helped him at the end was he had a rushing touchdown at the end of the game for 46 yards. We go with Christian Kirk, who's been a top 10 wide receiver this year in fantasy as well. He finished 19th, not terrible, 16.4 fantasy points for him, 104 yards, 6 receptions. And lastly, Amari Cooper didn't have the game as expected with Deshaun Watson back. He only had 4 receptions for 40 yards. Now, Noah Fant, what a call that was, and what a price we got him for 3,000. He finished as a tight end 3 this past weekend, 4 receptions, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Our defense, we always try to go with whatever we can get cheap that might produce. The Titans were the worst with -2, though. But overall, 138.3 points, not too bad. I think last week we were in the 80s, so a major improvement. Now we take a look at the start sit results, and actually they fared pretty well. We already talked about the starts here, and besides Amari Cooper, Brian Robinson put up some decent numbers. Trevor Lawrence was the worst quarterback; he finished around the middle, and of course Noah Fant came out to play third overall. So we'll talk about our sits, in which Matt Ryan, which should be a clear sit to everybody by now, finished 27th with 9.1 fantasy points. Not great at all. Damian Pierce finished at 22nd, 12.5 fantasy points. Again, we were used to him to scoring in the 20s. He had a nice couple of games there in the middle of the season, and now he's kind of died off. So still not the best for him. He probably could have found other options there in a deeper league, maybe not so. The sit Jalen Waddle was a amazing call. Might have been one of the best calls of the year. Injured for some of the game, but 98th overall, only one reception for 9 yards. They shut him down as that's what I thought, as well as the tight end Tyler Conklin, only 2.9 fantasy points, which finished 37th amongst tight ends in week 13. Again, what a call with that. So we move past week 13 and we're going to move on to week 14. There are a bunch of teams on byes this week, including Atlanta, Chicago, Green Bay, Indianapolis, New Orleans, and Washington. Again, this is where you're going to determine if you can get into the fantasy playoffs or not. And with all of those teams on bye, that could really hurt you. You know, with Chicago, if you've been playing Justin Fields or David Montgomery, of course, Green Bay, Aaron Jones, a big running back there. Indianapolis might be your number one overall pick, and Jonathan Taylor not going to be playing, potentially Michael Pittman as well. New Orleans, you think of Alvin Kamara, who has been really good, and Chris Olave too has been performing really well. Washington, you know, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson could have been a flex or running back too for you. Terry McLaurin, a top name wide receiver there. So there's a lot of guys that are out. So make sure tomorrow night on TikTok, that will be December 7th at 9:30, 10 o'clock Eastern time. You head to the Beast Benny Cakes TikTok account in order to get those questions answered. I've been doing multiple leagues for multiple years. I've done them all as far as auction, non-PPR, PPR, super flex, keeper leagues. So I know my stuff. I studied up for you. So all you have to do is listen and hopefully get yourself a win. But we got to do our predictions for week 14 as well. And we're going to continue that throughout the rest of the year. And we're going to start with the Raiders at the Rams on Thursday Night Football. Right now, I am going to be taking the Raiders to win. However, the Rams to cover. Baker Mayfield was just picked up off of waivers. It's probably not likely that he plays on Thursday night with a quick turnaround. So I like the Raiders to win, but the Rams to cover that 6. Over under of 44.5. Well, I'm going to be playing the under. I think that both teams can put up some points, but not that many, especially the Rams. So give me under 44.5. And we move on to Sunday of the 1 o'clock Eastern time games. And we start with the Jets at the Bills. And I'm locking in the Bills minus 9.5. I think that this is going to be a just dominating performance by the Bills. I think it has to be, especially after the last game between these two. Buffalo, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, expect a huge week from them. So I'm locking in minus 9.5. I think they make a statement here in Buffalo over the weekend. Over under 44. Give me the over in this one. I think that it easily hits that. Now we move on to the biggest spread that we have had all season long in the NFL, and that is Houston being 17-point underdogs on the road in Dallas. And Dallas has just been destroying teams, so it's very hard to say that they wouldn't cover that, but 17 points is a lot. We are going to take Dallas minus 17, though. I think they do get the job done, and they've proven why. Definitely Super Bowl contenders if the team stays healthy. Over under 44.5, you got to go over. Dallas scored over that last week on their own. I think they can do that again against this bad Texans team. So give me over 44.5. We're also going to lock in Minnesota plus 2.5 at Detroit. Detroit has been playing some good football lately, and we've talked about how bad their defense is, but they've been winning games. The defense is making some big plays, but the 10-2 Minnesota Vikings are underdogs on the road. I just can't believe that. Detroit definitely has an opportunity to win this game, no doubt about it, but Minnesota plus 2.5, we're getting plus for them on a 10-2 team is just insane. So I'm locking in Minnesota plus 2.5. Over under 53. I'm going to go under 53. I think it's just a little bit too high. We're also going to lock in the next game of Jacksonville plus 3.5 at Tennessee. Jacksonville just looked terrible against Detroit last weekend. Tennessee didn't look so great against the Eagles, but at home, I just like them a lot. So give me the minus 3.5 to win the game. Over under, I am going to slightly over, so slightly take the over of the 41.5. Philadelphia at the New York Giants. Right now, Philadelphia is 7-point favorites on the road. I'll take that. I think they cover that. They win in New York. New York just hasn't really been the same of recent, losing a ton of games in a row. Philadelphia, still one of the most dominant teams in the NFL, only losing one game. So give me Philly by a touchdown. Over under 45.5. For this one, I think I'm going to slightly play the under. I think the points are going to come from Philly. Lastly, with the 1 o'clock games, we have the Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right now, the Steelers are 3-point favorites. Lamar Jackson is going to miss probably 1 to 3 weeks with his injury. That means Tyler Huntley will be taken over at quarterback. Pittsburgh's on a little bit of a winning streak. So they got Baltimore at home. I think they win by the field goal. So give me Pittsburgh to win. And the over under of 37. I mean, this could be very low scoring, but I think it'll hit over the 37. So give me Pittsburgh over to win -3 and over 37. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see over on the right-hand side, it still has Miami and LA for the 4:05 game Eastern time, but that game was flexed to the Sunday night football game. So we have Kansas City at Denver right now at that 4:05 spot. Kansas City is 9-point favorites on the road in Denver. I think Kansas City covers that. Denver has looked terrible. They can't put up many points. That's why I'm going to play under 43, because if it's any points scored at all, it's going to come from Kansas City. Not a high scoring game, but I think it's going to be hard for Denver to get on the board. So I expect it to be like a 21-6 game in favor of Kansas City. Tampa Bay +4 at San Francisco. And this one is tough because San Francisco will be going with Brock Purdy. Although there's good signs that Jimmy Garoppolo most likely won't need surgery and could return, but it'll be Brock Purdy along the way. They did sign Josh Johnson, but I think they're going to go with Mr. Irrelevant there. He got the job done for them last weekend. And so I think that continues. I think they win at home barely, but Tampa Bay covers. It's going to be a very close, maybe by a field goal. So give me Tampa Bay to cover the 4, but San Francisco to win at home and over under 37.5. Very low, but I'm very much considering taking the under if I was betting this game, just because San Francisco's been struggling to put up points, and now with Brock Purdy there, it might make it tougher. Same with Tampa Bay, struggling to put up points. So give me under that and probably a low scoring, boring game, but San Francisco pulls out the narrow victory. The last lock is Seattle -3.5 at home versus Carolina. Seattle, just couldn't get the job, or they did get the job done barely against the Rams last weekend. The Seahawks aren't looking terrible. And with the injury to San Francisco, Seattle could still surprisingly win that division. Geno Smith has been one of the best quarterbacks this season. He has only 2 games with less than 2 passing touchdowns, in which those games he didn't even have 1. So he's had 2+ touchdowns in every one of his games. In his last 5, he's just looked phenomenal. Geno Smith will have a big day against the Carolina Panthers at home. So lock it in. Seattle -3.5. That's not a pun towards Tyler Lockett, but you can lock him in too for scoring a touchdown at least. Over under 43.5. I'm going to go over in this one. I think Seattle will put up the points. Miami is -3 favorites on the road against the Chargers, and I'm going to take that. Tua had his worst game of the year last weekend. I think that he gets that out of him, and he picks up a major win against the Chargers. The Chargers have just not looked good of recent, and just some team struggles. So it's a must-win for the Chargers, but I think the Dolphins are a better team than them, and they pull out the victory on the road by the field goal. Over under 51.5. Expect a lot of points scored in this one, so I'm hammering the over. And lastly, on Monday Night Football, we have the Patriots at the Cardinals. I'm taking the Cardinals in this one. They are underdogs by a point, but I just like them since they're at home. I think they bounce back. You get Hopkins back. Of course, Hollywood Brown coming back, and this team's coming off the bye, so they're fresh. So give me Arizona +1 at home against the Patriots in a low scoring game. Give me the under of 44. And that's how the week finishes off. Now we'll get to my daily fantasy lineup. This one is kind of interesting. I think that it could extremely produce because of our wide receiver picks here, but I'm cautious about the running backs. But this is how we have to do it if we want to get such good wide receivers. But we'll start with our quarterback. And again, I've hyped him up when we talked about Seattle, and that's Geno Smith. A phenomenal year he's been putting on. Again, 2+ touchdowns in every game this year besides two. So I'm taking him for 6,200 against the Panthers at home. Our running backs, we're going with two this week, and they're going to be Najee Harris and DeAndre Swift, both for 5,800. Najee Harris has been able to get double-digit fantasy points in his last 3 games, so we can hopefully expect that against this Ravens team over the weekend, and hopefully he finds the end zone. DeAndre Swift has also been coming along, doing really well, coming back from his injury. So I think he can have a big week this week as well. So for both 5,800, I'll take it. And again, that opens up this incredible duo of wide receivers, starting with the number 1 wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. Diggs has just been phenomenal, getting over 20+ fantasy points in a ton of his games. So anytime I could take the number 1 wide receiver, I'm going to take it. And I think this week is a statement game against the Jets. So Diggs snags at least 1 touchdown, possibly 2, has close to 100 receiving yards and probably 6 to 8 receptions. He's going to have a phenomenal week. We got to go back with Amon-Ra St. Brown too for the Detroit Lions. Look, 7,800. We're paying 8,300 for Diggs. We're paying 7,800 for Amon-Ra, but it's well worth it. I already told you about what he did last week, and again, he has just been destroying it. Ranked 5th out of wide receivers, and he's missed a few games. That's with receptions there. So love me Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. He's going to get you 8 receptions at least and a touchdown. We're also going to go with Tyler Lockett, who has had a touchdown in 5 consecutive games. Make it 6. He has another big week against the Panthers. What a phenomenal wide receiver he is. And the duo of Smith and Lockett here, double points, is incredible. Paying 6,500 for him, but it's well worth it once again. So, of course, 2 areas that we always pay down on normally are our defense and our tight end. We also usually pay lower on a flex, but this is probably the lowest flex we paid for. That wide receiver is Demarcus Robinson, who I actually like this week against Pittsburgh. He had 7 receptions for 41 yards last week, and that was Tyler Huntley's guy to go to. So I think that can continue against a Steelers team that's been giving up a lot of points to the wide receivers. So for 4,000, I think that's a steal, and I'll put him at my flex spot. We're going to go back to Noah Fant, only 3,100 after finishing tight end 3 last week. 3,000 last week when we got him, only went up 100. Give me Noah Fant. So we're going 3 Seattle Seahawks here, but I think they have a big week. And finally, our defense, we're going with the Broncos. Again, somebody that's a lot cheaper. We're only paying a little over 2,000 for him. I don't have the price up here on YouTube, but the Broncos taking on the Chiefs. Their defense has been playing really well. If they can hold the Chiefs to under 20, we'll get a couple points, and that's all we're asking out of our defense. And lastly, our Week 14 start sits. I highly recommend you starting Dak Prescott if you got him. I know it's like, yeah, I got Dak, so I'm going to be playing him. But that's not the case. Again, Dak coming back from injury. He's looked really well, but maybe some people are hesitant of starting him. I would not. Dak is a go against the Texans this week. 3 touchdowns for him, I think, and just a big day. A question mark here for some people that are listening to this, probably wondering why I'm sitting Kyler Murray. I don't love the matchup against the Patriots. Again, his receivers are back, but that Patriots defense is really good. I think it limits him to throwing for maybe 1 touchdown, possibly rushing for 1. But again, there's other options, better options on the board this week, and Kyler Murray wouldn't be one of them for me. I'm going to start DeAndre Swift for Detroit. I told you why I liked him already. He's been dominating. And I'm sitting Leonard Fournette, a guy who started off the season really hot, but has fallen apart. Injury concerns, came back, didn't play bad on Monday night. but coming off the short week and the just the share with White in the backfield has taken away from Leonard Fournette's ability. Also, you got to mention his matchup this week against the Niners isn't the greatest. So I would sit Leonard Fournette if I had him. Tyler Lockett, welcome back to the start list. You deserve it. I think, again, like I said, Tyler Lockett goes somewhere for 5, 6 receptions, 80 yards, and a touchdown. He is a lock now. He's got to be a lock in your lineup. Number 10 in fantasy this year. Just an underrated guy. Geno Smith has been as well. Lockett has been benefiting from it. And I'm sitting Brandon Ayuk, guy that's been on our start list so many times. I'm sitting him this week again with Brock Purdy. I don't know how that's going to look, and against the Tampa Bay defense that's pretty decent. Again, I'm not trusting Brandon Ayuk this week. And lastly, for start, you got to start Gerald Everett. With the injuries to the wide receivers and just to the team in general for the Chargers. Everett has been hurt, but he's back, and he's got to be a target hog this week. He's going to get you a touchdown this week. It's a must win for the Chargers, so they're going to do whatever they can. And Gerald Everett will be a part of that passing game, especially if Mike Williams doesn't return with that ankle injury. Lastly, we're going to sit Dawson Knox, a game where the Bills just need to win. Dawson Knox has not been involved in that passing offense, so I don't think they're going to get him involved here. They're going to stick with their guns and go with, Stephon Diggs. That's why I think he's going to have a huge week. Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie's been stepping up in that role, getting those receptions that normally would go to Dawson Knox. So I would sit him for Buffalo. Other than that, I want to thank you all for listening into this podcast. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube if you enjoyed it. Share it with your friends. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Sports Lock Podcast. Just remember, when I go live on TikTok on Wednesday nights, 9:30, 10 o'clock Eastern time, that is on my personal account, The Beast Benny Cake. So make sure to follow both accounts. Then you'll get notified when I go live, and I will be answering your questions on there. Week 14 is huge. Again, it might determine whether we make the playoffs or not. So there's probably going to be a lot of start-sit questions. Let me help you with that, make those decisions. So make sure to check it out over on TikTok. Other than that, I want to thank you guys for listening in to the Week 14 podcast. Good luck to you in this, must-win playoff week for you. Next week, we'll be talking fantasy playoffs. Can't believe we're here already. So I will see you then. I look forward to it. Enjoy the weekend. Let's make some money and let's get into the playoffs.